Toomas Sorra, born in Germany, Erlangen, Germany in 1949, and came here at 6 months of age to the United States with my parents. My parents were both born in Estonia and escaped Estonia like a lot of other Estonians at during the crazy war years. They escaped in September 1944 like a lot of other people did, and they went to Germany. When my parents left Estonia, they ended up in Germany, but they didn't end up in one of the displaced person camps like a lot of Estonians did. This Geislingen is the name that comes up all the time, and we were not there. I mean, I was not there anyway. They were not there. They were in Erlangen, which is a city near Munich, and my father had some kind of position. I'm sure that he was not a surgeon at the hospital, but I think since he was a surgeon, I think that they used him in some capacity, maybe even to do some surgical assistance or what have you. So they had an apartment of sorts, so that they were not in a DP camp as such. So they. I remember my mother saying how, they'd go out and collect apples and collect, stuff like that for food, but I think that they were maybe a small step above whoever was in a DP camp. It's funny, when I was growing up, I mean, there was not much discussion really of specific events during those years. I think that the connection, or any connection that I had with Estonia in my growing up years, with actually, Estonia the way it was the rather infrequent correspondence, letters that my parents would write to their relatives, and that would come back censored, and letters that would take 6 months to get there or get back, and that sort of thing. So there was certainly my sense as a child was that it was extremely closed, and it was impossible to get anything, any information in or out in those years, 60s, 70s. I don't know what, again, I'm 10, 12 years old at that time, so what would be censored out of letters? I think probably anything that would be interpreted as showing that things are good here in the United States or things are bad in Estonia, because of course everything was wonderful in the Soviet paradise, and everything outside of the Soviet paradise was terrible and not worthless. I'd been 12, 13 or so, and there was somebody that came to visit my father who my father knew from back when, and my father had told us, "Oh, this is this is a government. This is Soviet government. He's an Estonian, but he's a government official. He's maybe KGB, whatever he is. But he's not going to be able to talk." I remember my father preparing us, my younger brothers, and so he's not going to be able to talk about anything. So you just have to kind of watch yourself around him. So we were in the apartment. He stayed for a week maybe, or a few days, and I guess we tried to sneak in a question every so often. What's it like over there? Things like that, and we really there wasn't any conversation, and the only conversation that I recall was walking with my father and him when we took him out to the chicken farm. Again, this is 62, 63. And walking in the middle and there was a big field there, walking in the middle of the field, and then this man starts saying, "Well, things really are not that good in Estonia, but I really can't talk about this except in open spaces like this." So clearly he felt that he might be bugged, that being in our apartment, that maybe maybe it was mission impossible, whatever. I was forced to come to the Estonian house. No, forced, but it came. My life was Estonian life. Even to this day, I communicate with my brothers. Most of it is in Estonian. I mean, I have 4 kids, and they all, to some degree, my oldest speaks Estonian fluently. I was not really allowed to even have much of as a kid, much of a social life outside of the Estonian. There were enough things to do in the Estonian New York culture. There were Estonian Boy Scouts. There was Estonian school, which was done, every other Saturday until I was 12, 13, 14, whatever. Scouts went on till 15, 16. There were camps. There was folk dancing. There was so much stuff. And when I got old enough to be able to take the subway on my own, I took the subway on my own. As a kid, to have your parents drag you to Estonian Independence Day festivities is like, please. So, because you'd sit there for an hour and a half, listen to speeches, a couple of songs, and it was like, do I really have to go? And going there every year, I would really, that's the venue where I would have the thought most strongly, are these people out of their minds? Estonia's going to become independent? What are they, nuts? No, I mean, that was the thought as a child, 12, 15. That's never going to happen. In the 60s, never going to happen. In the 70s, never going to happen. And, I was wrong. And so were a lot of other people. So that's good. But no, it really certainly seemed at that point that the idea of Estonian independence was fantasy. I don't know if my parents and their contemporaries believed that Estonia would become independent again. I don't know if that's the case. What I do know, though, is that was the fact that Estonia wasn't independent was clearly the major impetus for them getting all these damn organizations together and keeping the school and keeping the scouts and keeping the houses and keeping all this alive. Because there was, they didn't know if Estonia would be independent again, or if that would ever happen, or when it would happen, or how long it would take. So it was their God-given responsibility that they had to keep this going here because there was no other option. There still is a dichotomy of sorts between the Estonians that, like me, who are called in Estonian väliseestlased, and the Estonians who have come, who are called kodueestlased. Väliseestlased is like far outside Estonians, and kodueestlased is like home Estonians. I'm just saying in a general sense, there still are kind of 2 groups. Of course, there's intermingling of sorts, but there are, if we look at the house events here, for example. I mean, I can just think, we haven't had for a couple of years, we haven't had one event which we had for 5, 6 years in a row because it kind of lost, but finally we said, okay, let's take a break. But it was camp song evening, okay? So anybody that's gone to camps, that's how many of us learned our songs. And as you probably know from a little bit of Estonian history, Estonians like to sing, right? So the singing revolution, all that. But camp song night, which was always a great event, you would have almost all of us, väliseestlased, because there were no camps of the similar nature in Estonia. So whoever came over from Estonia since 1991, what do we know about camps? We don't go to the camps. Whereas if you had an Estonian pop star like a guy named Tanel Padar, who was big, 8, 10 years ago. I don't know if he's still that big. But Tanel Padar would be here. The place would be packed with kodueestlased, but not too many of my type. We don't know this guy. So it's those kinds of things that would be a different draw to one group versus the other group. The camps, the only camp that's still, the only actual a sleepaway camp in the United States is in Long Island. It's actually part of we own it. We own the land, and the camp people run it. The camp used to be 6 weeks when I was a kid. My mother dropped me off there. We didn't have a car then, so she took the Long Island Railroad, dropped me off there, and then I would see her a couple of times during that 6 weeks. Either her or my father would come out, and maybe she'd catch a ride with somebody. And the main activity of the camp in the 1950s, when there was no pool yet, the pool was built in 1960, 61. The main activity was walking to the lake twice a day and walking back. That took 5 hours, and the swimming in between. So, you know, and of course there were Estonian lessons and folk dancing. And what did you do in camp? Then they built a pool, so then you had swimming twice a day, you had track and field, Estonian classes, folk dancing, and camp was cool. I mean, camp was fine. I went to camp from the age of 5 till 15, whatever, and then I aged out, and then I became a counselor, so then I was a counselor for 3-4 years. So I lived in that camp. I mean, the camp now is still in existence. The camp now is 2 weeks. It had been 2 weeks, now they were going up to 3 weeks. So there is interest in the camp. And it actually, so the camp is actually one example of where there is an intermingling of, you know, us and them. You know, when I say us and them, it's really not that black and white. I'm just, you know, but camp is a place, and also the Estonian school here is another place where there are, probably in the Estonian school, there are more kids who are from people that have, you know, come here since 1990, you know, from Estonia, than there are descendants of my kinds of people.